Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Mike McBride. I'm joined by our dynamic duo of psychologists.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and I am thrilled that we are here doing this again. Dan, welcome.
Oh yeah, and looking forward to this. As I've mentioned before, I love doing this. Love talking about psychology stuff, and a chance to pick apart what the internet has to offer is always a blast.
Yeah, I always look forward to this because otherwise I don't really get much insight into what you guys do. So it's kind of fun to be like a fly on the wall, sort of. But to anybody who's just joining us, any of the newbies out there, if you don't know what we're talking about, essentially what I've done is I found a scenario online where somebody posts a scenario and asks everybody who's the asshole in the situation, and that's what Dan and Gayle hopefully will help us figure out. When there are identifiable information in the post, we've changed those to make them more discreet. And if you're new, always stick around through the end. We have some kind of bonus conversation at the end, but neither Gayle nor Dan know what we're going to discuss today. I haven't tipped them off at all. And today's headline is, am I the asshole for insisting on separate beds with my boyfriend for a trip?
No.
Please say more.
We're not just going to go with no?
No, as my asshole colleague jumped off the ledge there and made a snap judgment. No, you're not an asshole. I need to hear more.
You know what?
Really go a number of different ways. I'm excited to hear more.
That's a very reasonable request, Gayle. All right, Michael, can you tell us the backstory here so that we don't rush to judgment?
Of course, yeah. I will definitely hook you up here, and I'll give you a teaser. There's actually two questions here. So there's actually two am I the assholes kind of that come out of this. But here's the scenario. My boyfriend and I graduated this past year. We discussed maybe taking a short trip somewhere, but cost is a big concern. We don't have jobs lined up in our field, so we're not making a lot. My brother and his wife invited us to stay with them and their son so that we could save on accommodation costs. It's about a 1,200-mile trip, and we're fine paying with gas and food and all the other incidentals, but a hotel or Airbnb would make it too costly. His brother lives in a touristy town, so it's even more expensive, but it'll be more of a vacation or a treat.
Okay.
My nephew is 2.5 and just graduated to a real bed. The queen size bed he has now is what I used when I've visited in the past. And the guest room is now an office for my brother since he's worked from home. My boyfriend and I sleep in different rooms, separate rooms. So my brother suggested, knowing this, that my boyfriend and I take the nephew's bed and a pull-out couch. And the nephew can sleep in the race car, his old bed, for the week that we visit. This all sounded fine.
Wait. She doesn't want to sleep in the race car? That would be so cool. I haven't slept in. I've never had a race car bed.
Me neither.
Go visit the brother.
Yeah.
And I hear it's up for a cheap stay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, she doesn't want to sleep in the race car bed. Never mind. Yeah. Please continue, Michael.
Everyone was fine with the arrangements, but then when my brother's wife heard about the sleeping arrangement, she blew up. She insists that we share the pullout, and there's no reason to put my nephew out. And she thinks it's rude that we're even considering taking up so much of their space. Her last text in the group chat was to say that we were fucking weird to have separate rooms. I guess she didn't know until now that we don't sleep together. My boyfriend has a lot of trouble sleeping, and he sleeps best alone. I'd rather he be rested and enjoy seeing the area, since this is his first time going out to the East Coast, and I don't want him tired on top of it. I told my brother if it's such a hassle for us to sleep separate, that we would skip the trip. I offered to bring our air mattress to put it in the office, but my brother says it won't fit. And if the couch is pulled out, it won't fit in the den either. My brother's disappointed, but he says he understands if we won't come, and he'll try to talk to his wife. So really the questions are, who's the asshole here? And then 2, are we weird for sleeping in separate beds?
Oh, I love that they asked that. Excellent.
Yeah, and
so we got a couple things to talk about.
Didn't you do a social media post about exactly the question of
I
sleeping in separate
did.
beds?
Yeah, so I guess we're going to tackle these maybe in reverse order. I can't remember when it was. I think it hit my radar maybe about December of last year, 2023. Cameron Diaz, I believe, came out and talked about sleep divorce. Now, this is kind of a strange name. I took some heat on social media for the term. Look,
Yeah,
guys, I didn't make it up. It's the thing. It's the term that's floating around out there.
it's
It's
an
this like
inflammatory term.
it really is, but it's this idea that, a committed couple doesn't share a sleeping space. And, is this healthy or concerning for a relationship? And, I think there are really interesting arguments on both sides of this. And I think that there are opportunities for connection when you share a sleeping space, and there are opportunities for having poorer sleep when you share a sleeping space. So I think ultimately it came down on the side of do what works for you because it works, than trying to judge someone else's sleeping arrangement.
Yeah, and
What did you think when you heard all this?
so first off, my first reaction is I hate the idea. I really, really hate the idea. And I think that let me say that was my initial response, and I'll explain why.
Yeah.
But there's an intimacy to sharing a bed space, and I'm not talking about sex here. I'm talking about just the intimacy of that shared space that I think is really special, and I think it's wonderful when a married couple can, or a not married together couple, like when a couple can share that bed space. I think it enhances the closeness and intimacy in the relationship. And at the same time, like, I'm aware that sometimes if one person's sleeping badly, if you're in the same bed, there's a reasonable probability that the other one's going to sleep badly too. Sometimes people snore loudly or kick in their sleep or roll over or, generally speaking, obnoxious when they sleep. And I come down like you do, Gayle, on the do what you think works best for you. And if you're fine with it, fine. That's fine with. But I also do a lot of work with couples trying to when I do my sleep work, I do a lot of work with couples trying to get them back to the same bed because they're frequently sleeping in different beds, not by choice, but because they think it's a cure for their insomnia. So I eventually fall out where you do on that issue. And I do a tremendous amount of work with sleep and insomnia. And most of the time when they're in separate beds, because they think it's a cure. So in that case, I'm definitely not a fan. But if you sleep better separate and it works for you as a married couple, who am I to judge what you want to do?
I think there's an opportunity here to be somewhat flexible, if one of the individuals is ill, just from an illness prevention standpoint, go sleep in another room. It's okay. It's not going to tank your marriage.
No.
If, one of you has to get up early for a flight or works an early shift, it might work better to not sneak out of the bedroom and worry about waking up your bed partner. So, I think, again, if it works for you, it works for you. But let's make sure that the reasons that you are missing out on those intimate moments, the falling asleep, touching, just the warmth of your partner's body next to you, or the waking together, let's make sure that if you're missing out on that there's a good benefit on the other end, as opposed to just ending up in a lose-lose kind of situation. Okay.
Yeah. We're in agreement that we'll set this aside for now, but you're not the asshole for wanting to sleep separately. It's not my cup of tea, either as a sleep psychologist or as someone who does couples work,
or as a husband.
Well, I'm not going to get into my personal life situation. But I think there's a benefit to be gained from sharing the bed space. It's there's something very close and intimate about sharing a bed. And again, I'm not using the word intimate here to mean sexual. I'm using the word intimate to mean close, warm, comforting, emotionally connected. And I think unless it's interfering with the couple's closeness, I default to the same bed, but I also don't judge you if you don't like it that way.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would say is making sure that you have a clear conversation about
Mhm.
that separate sleeping arrangement and making sure both people are enthusiastically on board. We can
Uh,
get into situations with couples where one acquiesces because the other feels strongly, and then they can build some hard feelings over
yeah.
time because they didn't, whatever, get their way or didn't feel heard in that disagreement and really aren't getting their needs met. So this really needs to be one of those decisions you make as a couple where both are enthusiastically in favor.
Yeah, I could totally see one person enjoying their solitude of their own bedroom, sleeping really well, and their partner lying in bed feeling lonely and rejected.
Yeah,
Yeah, the cure for that is a good conversation, like so many things. The cure
of
for that is
course.
good
Of
conversation.
course. Well, what is not the cure is having someone who is not a part of your romantic relationship or sleeping arrangement judge your sleeping arrangement. So,
Thank you for bringing us
sister-in-law,
back
you
to the
need to
topic at hand.
sit on your opinion about that because, quite frankly, if you don't want to sleep separate, I have the cure for you. Don't sleep separate.
Yeah, I mean, the sister, was it sister-in-law, just
Yeah.
annoyed me here. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to say, you know what, I would rather you not take up, we have a smallish place, I'd rather you not take up this room and that room to set to sleep separately. Is there any way you can work around that? Is there anything you do to work around that? I would really appreciate it from a space standpoint. Fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I'm a little surprised that she feels so strongly about her son moving back to the race car bed. But what we don't know, and I'm going to assume positive intent here, is how hard was it to get him from the race car bed to this larger queen
ooh,
bed? Like maybe he didn't want to give up the race car bed, and this is really a step backward for the family that will impact them for weeks and months to
I
come.
yeah. Now we're going a bit beyond the scope of
Of
the
course, I'm
discussion.
making some facts up
We
here.
do make some facts up. Well, sometimes we make some facts up, but I thought about this. Like, I commented earlier, I outed myself for having been sad that I never had a race car bed. I don't know
Yeah.
that I'd want to get out of the race car bed if I had a race car bed. A race car bed's got to be a really cool thing to have.
And he's like 2, so he's really young. So there's not a lot of reasoning with this child. I,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't like how the sister-in-law went about communicating this parenting kind of
yeah,
issue. If it is, I'm sort of assuming it is. I think there are lots of more gentle ways to have approached and addressed that. But I sort of imagine as a parent myself, someone not a part of my household, not really realizing what hurdles and
yeah.
hills you climb to change child behavior and how, 1 or 2 nights of something can really set you back.
Right.
That's
But
really
she
hard.
didn't
But I
need to
don't
go.
like how she
Yeah.
communicated about
She
it.
went to the nuclear option
She did.
rather
That's a good
than
description.
focus on, I don't like this because it's going to be inconvenient for me and trouble me, which I think sometimes we're afraid of saying what bothers us, and we try to put it on something else like that's better, but it's worse.
Yeah, right.
It's far better to say, I'm inconvenienced by this and I don't want to be inconvenienced by this. This is going to be problematic for me. But to then turn around and use the attack tactic, like you're fucked up because you won't sleep in the same bed. You're the people who are bad here and wrong because you won't sleep. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah,
That's a dick move.
for sure. For sure. So we've established perhaps the sister-in-law, even if she's well-meaning, she falls somewhere on this sort of dickishness scale of
Yeah,
something
don't
and is
don't
maybe more dickish than not or more asshole than not.
well, I think she's an asshole because she's telling other people how to live their relationship. I just
Yes.
don't think it's our business. If something works for a couple and they're not hurting anyone, don't judge their choice. And I see this, I sometimes work with couples who are polyamorous. Um, and I mean, there are many who would say that just would never work for them to have more than one partner while in a marriage. To be ethically non-monogamous, they would say is terrible. There's some who would argue that. I wouldn't argue that, and it wouldn't be my place to argue that. We accept what works for couples works for couples,
And
uh,
thruples and so on.
right. And I think that we make serious mistakes when we start judging what works for other couples. I've seen couples who, their way of getting along is not my way of getting along. A way of
Yeah.
getting along that I particularly think is the best way of getting along. But that's not made my business to
But
judge
I think
how they get along.
And just to interrupt you a little bit, we're calling the sister-in-law an asshole here, and maybe we're jumping the gun. I think we're going to take this maybe in a couple of parts, but she's also an asshole because of potentially blaming the son for the concern she has about the space in their small living quarters, or
Right.
going to the nuclear option to talk about the son's needs and not being a little bit more measured in her response. So I think for me, she's an asshole twice over here.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there was an opportunity.
That's an impressive thing on the show. I don't know that I've ever
I know,
called
but
someone an asshole twice over, but the sister-in-law is clearly an asshole
do
twice
some
over.
do some problem solving here. We have a small house, and I could totally hear myself saying, we have a small house.
Mhm.
I know you all don't like to sleep in the same bed typically. Would you feel comfortable if we were able to make this arrangement or that arrangement? Or can you sleep on the pull out and maybe put a pillow between? And maybe it's not my business to tell them what to do, make suggestions, but I would want to engage in some like, this is what we've got. Like, I'm really sorry, but we just don't have the space to give you two separate rooms. Can you work something out to be in the same room? Here are your options for that. But it's that open-handed gesture of this is what my limit is. I want to work with you.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I'm really struggling with here is that sense of being a host and being a gracious host and giving of my home. I sort of get the feeling that the sister-in-law really doesn't want the company, period,
Yeah.
end of sentence. And
Yeah.
this couple is not really welcome. Maybe she's feeling used or resentful or something. But this is not the meta communication here is I am not really trying to create a welcome space, a celebratory space for you and your boyfriend to come and really enjoy the end of your educational time and time before your career, because I could imagine myself being in that position and saying, look, I get it. And I'll sleep on the air mattress, have my bedroom, right? I would have made a different arrangement because of what is okay with me. I'm not expecting anybody else to do this, but
Yeah, I
have
would never do that.
a,
You're
yeah,
nicer
that's
than me, though.
fine. And
You're probably
maybe,
nicer
but
than
like,
me.
I would be really excited to have the company. And I think there's something to being, a host and making the time really lovely and exciting. I'm going to tell just a brief story when we shared a space with someone in a fairly pricey city, and this really lovely friend offered to allow us to stay in her apartment on a gorgeous pricey island.
Mhm.
And then she left for the weekend or the week and let us just have the place. And this was the most
She's way
amazing
nicer than
gesture.
me.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't
She's way
necessarily
nicer
recommend
than
this
me.
or
She's
think that anybody else would do this, but
way nicer than me.
way nicer. I mean, it was a single bedroom. You'd have been on a couch. Like five of us would have been tripping over each other. And I just think there are opportunities to be incredibly gracious hosts. And I still remember staying at this particular apartment.
Mhm.
And it was so nice that, just make it work for your family. No questions asked. I'm going to just get out
Yeah.
of your hair and
Yeah.
really let us enjoy this beautiful seaside town.
No, I agree with you. I think if I'm the original poster here, and I don't remember whether she said she had the financial wherewithal to do this, I would go out of my way to get a hotel with two queens because she likes to sleep in separate beds. I
Yeah,
don't
she
think I would
doesn't. I
not
think
feel
that's the problem.
right. I would not feel welcome. I don't want to go someplace where people don't want me there, and
Yeah.
I would just not feel welcome. And as you pointed out, Gail, when you have guests, what you want them to do is feel like they're at home, to feel like they're like they are in not in any way, shape, or form inconveniencing you in the slightest.
Right.
And that's what you want. And
And
she's failed. Not the OP, the sister-in-law has totally failed in that.
yeah, I think the OP is fine, and we're sort of working our way backward through this post. I think the
Yeah,
OP
we are.
is fine in making the ask, hey, if we travel out to your resort town, would we be able to stay with you and enjoy our time with you and in this resort town? But
Mhm.
the moment there's just even a little hint or a sniff of resistance, I think you
No,
pull the plug and you say, nope, I'm not coming. This
no.
really, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a good time. And I understand that the OP and her boyfriend are, I think it's a female, are looking forward to doing some traveling together and trying to do it on a shoestring budget. But I would really think that the moment you get that
Mhm.
flavor of not welcome, you switch plans. You maybe need to look into a hostel or something like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully they haven't aged out of using one of those. I don't think Americans remember that we have those available for traveling youngsters. But they can be a great, inexpensive way to travel when you're
Yep.
young and to have a reasonable accommodation.
Yeah. No, I think
So,
I think it's a solution. They have to. She's going to end up. I don't want to go on this trip, so I think it's either a cancel or find some inexpensive way of staying. So I don't think I don't think OP is an asshole. I certainly don't think she's an asshole for wanting to not share a bed if she's more comfortable not sharing a bed. And I'm really I'm right with you on just I'm not happy about this sister-in-law. She's just not okay. This is not okay. So we've
all right,
rendered our verdict, Michael.
Michael, how'd we do?
How do we compare to what the internet think about us about this situation rather?
Well, this one, I don't know. I always enjoy seeing what the internet does because it often makes a sharp left turn when I don't expect that. But so initially when I saw this post and it was asking about separate beds, I misread it and I thought it was a situation where like you're in a serious relationship and your family forces you to be in separate beds. And so like I had a completely different set of expectations going into the post initially, but and then very quickly I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So the internet mostly was not the asshole or
Right.
no assholes here. And I'll explain more on those.
Yes, please. We disagree.
One of the really interesting asides that took up a lot of the conversation that was unanticipated was somebody just made the comment that if it's okay with the nephew, then it should be fine with everybody else. And then a lot of people were like, the nephew's 2.5 years old. He doesn't know what the hell's going on.
No,
like,
no,
you know, and
no.
then there's like this piling, why does this kid get a queen bed? He goes from a race car to a queen bed? What the hell's going on? Oh, he's abnormally large. And like this, I mean, it just went down this whole road that I had not anticipated going, which was really funny. But so the no assholes here basically kind of said, you're kind of an asshole for dictating what you need when you're asking somebody a favor. Like you're going to their house, you don't get to tell them this is how I want to stay at your house. That was
So
go ahead.
let me jump in here because I moved a little bit by this, and Gail, you look puzzled, but what we don't know is how much OP, like when people write these things, they're looking often to be told you're not an asshole. And did she leave out some sharpness in her own? Like she's like, oh, like did she say, hey, my boyfriend and I don't like sharing the same bed because we both sleep really badly when we do? Is it, could we sleep maybe do it this way and this way? Would that work for you? Or is it like, no, we can't, that doesn't work for us because we share it, we have separate beds, we don't sleep in the same room, and we can't make it work that way. So like that's not gonna work. Like
Tone matters and how you communicate absolutely matters. So
100%.
I see that where then we would maybe have a different rendering about the number of assholes present in this.
Absolutely. Because
situation.
if she went to, I mean, we've all stayed with family, and I've never like I might have said like this is how we prefer it. Like, oh, would it be possible for like, oh, our kid can sleep here, and we'd like this, we'd rather not share the room, but we're okay with this, and they can ride a couch just fine. But I'd rather like if that works, but it's the if it works for you kind of comment.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work for you, that's totally fine. I'll figure something else out. And that's what I'm trying to figure out here. Because if she dictated, then I'm putting her sliding her over to like, no, you're being an asshole if you're dictating.
Well,
yeah, absolutely. If she's dictating it, I think she definitely is in camp asshole. If she said, hey, this is our preference, but we can do this other, and then you get the pushback, then I think she's not an asshole. And I definitely give the
No, I'm laughing because you created this camp asshole, and I'm trying to figure out like
not summer camp, Dan.
Well, yeah, well, that was I imagine this like summer camp with the sign over the thing that says camp asshole, and then like what are the I'm just gonna stop myself right there because yeah.
Hopefully our listeners enjoyed that mental image as well, but you know what I mean.
Family podcast, and I don't think we should go down the path.
Family podcast? When did that happen?
It's not a family. No, it's not. You're right.
We curse far too much and allude to things that really adults understand.
You're right. It's not a, you're right. It's not a
family-friendly podcast.
100% not a family podcast.
So let me
right.
Let me ask this kind of clarifying question along that thing. So, because this was then for me one of the more interesting side conversations, which is like, when do you, how much sway do you have when you're staying at someone's house that they're doing you a favor? So, okay, in this situation, you have two people and you're insisting on separate beds, but let's say,
or requesting.
Well, we don't know, but
you use the word insisting. Insisting puts you in castle. Requesting.
I said insisting because the minute that they couldn't have separate beds, they're like, we're out. We're not going to do it then. Like that in the original post.
But that may be a matter of like, you know what, I would love to come stay with you, but if we have to be in the same bed, it's just not going to work for us. I'm so sorry.
Okay. All right. Fair. Okay. So let's say now it is a family of three. So you have two adults and one child. Do you all fit into one space? Or do you insist on a separate room or do you request a separate room for the child? And if it's a family of four, like at what point does it become?
Who's massaging the facts now?
Well, yeah, really?
Like, okay, Michael, so then they also ask questions about like dietary things. Like when you go to somebody's house, can you say like, hey, I require this or that? Or
that was in my head too. And I think it really comes down to, and I think it's similar. Like, if I have a dietary need, and we've done this, we've covered this in previous podcasts, link in the show notes, where we talked about dietary needs, and I think it's entirely appropriate. I asked any guests who are staying at my house if they have any dietary restrictions or needs, and if it is like, okay, you're gluten-free, are you gluten-free because you have a severe allergy and we need to try to really keep our, which we may not be able to accommodate in our house because of how much baking we do, but are you gluten-free by choice and you'd rather not have gluten in your food, but it's not gonna harm you. And I can accommodate one, but probably can't accommodate the other. And I'm to be honest about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all the same. Is you make a request. So if we're not putting it on the host, we're putting it on the person who is coming over and they're the invited guest. Then I think you make your requests, and you need to be aware that those may or may not be accommodated. You should approach them kindly and gently. And depending on the severity of the need, you say, I can't come, or that'll be fine. And you accept the answer that's given, and you make your choices accordingly, whether that's sleeping space or if that's dietary needs or whatever that is.
But the key about all of this is this sort of like, this is what my needs are. This is where my limits are. Can you accommodate? Can you not accommodate? Does it work for you? And trying to figure out like what works best. If someone keeps strict kosher and absolutely won't eat something that's not kosher, if you're going to come stay at my house, I'm sorry, you probably need to bring your own food. You're welcome to stay here. However, I don't have a kosher kitchen. Will that work for you? And that's a conversation back and forth. I don't have enough space to put up people in separate rooms. I would love it if you stayed with me. But if you did, you'd need to share a room. Will that work for you? It won't work for you. I'm so sorry.
Right.
Same thing the other way around. Like, I would love to stay there, but if we can't accept rooms, it just isn't going to work for us. Thank you so much for offering. It's all like with grace.
Right. I mean, if you're a family of 10 and you want to go visit your brother and they have a small space on the East Coast, and you will not all fit because you have 10 people in your family, I don't think it's any different than, hey, we want to take up this many rooms if we're a family of 4. I mean,
Right.
it's really about, will this work for the host? And if not, then the host needs to say no, or the guest needs to be able to say, thank you for the conversation about this. It's not going to work for me. I think I'll make other arrangements.
Everyone could have handled this with grace.
Conversation.
They could have handled this with grace.
Yes. Yeah.
And had a nice, pleasant conversation around needs and figuring out what's a need and what's a want. It may be that they just simply cannot sleep in the same. Like if they've tried, and it fails every time, and they're just going to be fucking miserable the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay, great. But let's have a conversation that's pleasant about it.
Agreed.
And it really felt like in the conversation there were chats that were either team, you get what you get and you don't lose your shit. Like you're going to someone's house, you accept what they're willing to give you. But then also, like you should be a gracious host. You're absolutely right. Like we'll open up your house, whatever. And then, where people ultimately fell on no assholes here is like you asked, they offered what they were willing to do, and you said that's not going to work for you. Okay, great. That's fine.
If not for the attitude,
Yes.
the attitude sets it is where they cross the line.
Yeah. And there were other questions like, was the brother-in-law or was the brother having to work because the office was the guest space? And if he's supposed to be working at that time, like it makes sense not to have an air match. Anyway, like there's lots of possibilities, but thank you so much for a fascinating glimpse into conversations about, the internet forums on things about sleep and separate beds and all kinds of fun stuff.
All right. Well, thank you for giving us a really interesting one. This is great because we do so much sleep work in our practice. So I really enjoyed getting an opportunity to use this as a chance to talk a bit about what we know around sleep.
And so often sleep work juxtaposes with couples work.
Yeah.
Couples often tend to sleep together. I find when I do my sleep work, I'm often like touching on couples issues and potential conflicts there. So this was one of those that gave us the opportunity to delve into that a little bit. So thank you so much, Michael.
Of course. And everyone, please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms, their neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for the bonus conversation about, I don't know, whatever happens beyond their minds today. See you on the other side of the credits.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's the bonus conversation.
All right, Dan, I have a question for you.
You bet.
I am curious because like us, you guys tend to play family games.
Mhm.
Tend to spend some good quality time. We know this is good for families. Just really quick in the few minutes that we have left, I'm curious, what is your family's favorite family game?
We love a game. We call the bowl game, and I can't really explain it easily. So I'm going to try to find a lookup for it, and I'll have Michael ask Michael to please put something in the show notes. But it's just a game that's very free flowing. What I like about a good family game is that if there's a competitive element to it, it's a fun competitive element, and everyone is laughing. We sometimes play telestrations, but we never keep score because, like, why keep score? It's just hilarious. So
Awesome.
I'll find some write up on the bowl game because I've never been able to explain it even when people join us for a game until we actually
done a great job. We played it with you. It's been so much fun. We've taken it to our families as well. And one of the greatest things I'll say about bowl is there are there's a minimum number of players to make it fun, but there really isn't a maximum, which makes it fantastic.
We've played it with as few as 6 and as much as like a dozen.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could expand it further than that. It's our go-to game for big gatherings. And you can play it when you're 8 years old with a bit of an adaptation. You can play it with at any age. It's a lot of fun. And the only thing you need is a bowl, a couple of pens, and some slips of paper. So it's a practically free game. You got that shit laying around the house.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, look for the show notes. We'll be sure to include that. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Tune in again next week for a whole nother Am I the Asshole debate.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.